I'm Angela Beard, and I'm going to give you the little spiel about who I am. I'm with the Sanford Institute of Philanthropy, which is an institution set up by a very, I believe, forward-thinking philanthropist in San Diego area. He saw that there was a need in the nonprofit sector for support, particularly in fundraising. The joke is that he'd had so many bad fundraising requests that he wanted to teach people how to do it right. So he funded a number of affiliates around the United States. We're all over from New York to Florida to here in Seattle. And we are housed here at City University, and Sanford's mission, as you can see, is to support the nonprofit sector to help them achieve greater impact by providing fundraising training to professional fundraisers at all stages of their careers. We do that based on what's called the donor relationship cycle. Many of you are familiar with it. This is the Stanford curriculum, which breaks it into 8 cycles that you can see that most of you are hopefully familiar with. And we present curriculum according to different stages on this cycle. And a little bit more about me. It's about building genuine relationships. I'm still not used to that fly-in thing. Again, I'm Angela Beard. I've been here at Sanford coming up on a year now in July. Most of my background is in fundraising. I started as a grants writer for Pacific Northwest Ballet, and then spent long years of fundraising for mostly arts nonprofits in the Seattle area. Did a little stint at grad school because I wanted to be an executive director, but came back and went back into fundraising because it's just so great and awesome and fun, as you all know. So, there I am. There's my contact information, and there's cards back there if you need them here in the room. And let's talk about impact. So, what I want you to either walk away from your computer with today or leave this room with today are 3 things. So, what are the challenges to measuring impact? We may know some of them. There may be some of which we're not aware. Why does it matter? I mean, aren't the program delivery issues the most important? Well, it turns out no, as I'm sure many of you already know. And that being said, what are some ways that we can describe our impact as part of our case for support? But I also want to let you know that I, as a former writer and grant writer and fundraiser, remember, and some of you may share this experience, that often I was the one driving reporting results because the funders wanted to hear them. So today's discussion is kind of a hybrid, if you will, between how we write about our impact and how we actually determine our impact, what some of the ways to do that are, what some of the steps to take that are, and then how we can talk about it, okay? And I have to give full credit to this fabulous book I read to prepare for this, which I would highly recommend, and I don't usually do sales pitch, but this one's really good. The Goldilocks Challenge, which I got on Amazon for $13 on my Kindle. It is wonderful. And Mary Kay Gugerty is our own UW Evans School. I learned a lot. I thought I knew more than I did. I learned a lot. I would, check it out if you're so inclined. And I'll have a lot of resources that I also use on the internet for free. Free. We love that, right? At the end of this talk. We do send out the recording and the slides, so there's no need to frantically scramble for notes or anything. You get all of this in your inbox tomorrow or certainly by the end of the week. Okay. Any questions before I get going? Anybody out there need anything, Austin?
Not so far.
Okay, great. So let's do a poll. I really do want to know what's going on out there. You'll see 3 choices pop up on your screen, and I'd like to know how many of you design and implement your own evaluation. How many of you write about evaluation as well as doing it? And how many of you evaluation is still something that's new to your nonprofit? We'll give you a few minutes to fill that out. Check that box. This is where we need the Jeopardy music, right? What's going on? You're a nonprofit, since I get to pick on you.
All 3.
All three?
Yeah.
So you write about it, you do it, and you...
And it's still kind of
It's
new,
still kinda
because we
new?
don't really do too in-depth of evaluation.
Okay.
Anyways, we're an advocacy organization, so it's based mostly on evaluating our success and communicating it to the funders.
And what, I'm sorry, you're the only one here. How do you accomplish that? Do you survey? What tools do you use?
We've incorporated it into our program planning, so each of our programs kind of have like a variety of metrics that they like to track to value their success, and then usually it's at the end of the year or mid-year or for a grant report, we'll kind of assess where we are with progress.
Okay. What's going on online? What are our folks saying?
So far we've had 7 results. 2 people said that they design and implement program evaluations themselves. 3 say that they write about evaluations others implement,
okay.
And 2 say that evaluation is new to their organization.
So pretty even split. 2 folks online who do the evaluation themselves, 3 that write about what others do, and 2 that were brand new or pretty new. And we have another guest.
So sorry.
That's okay. Welcome. How you doing? I think you're going to make our friend here feel less alone.
Oh, good.
We're just getting going. We're
Sorry.
talking about what's going on within people's organizations. So,
Perfect.
okay, like I said, this is a little bit of a hybrid between knowing what goes into a good evaluation and being able to report about it to you for your case statement. So let's go on. What are the challenges? I'm going to tell you the challenges that I've seen or read about, and then I want to hear from you. What are the challenges to evaluation? We don't have any data, and the funders want it. I found this to be, well, we'll get on to the outputs versus outcomes in just a minute, but when I was trying to write about evaluation for the arts, that's a very tough one, because the change you're trying to accomplish is intrinsic. You want people to be inspired, you want them to learn, you want them to be touched spiritually. There are all kinds of things you want to happen that it's hard to observe. It's a new organization or project. So I teach grant writing at a couple of local institutions, and this is a lot of students who are thinking about starting up a nonprofit or a new program come to me and say, okay, we have this fabulous idea, but to apply for grants, we have to report on the impact we're having, and we haven't started it yet, so what do we do? Anybody else in that situation, maybe? Outcomes are difficult to measure, right? Outcomes, note the language I'm using, outcomes are difficult to measure. A lot of our outcomes have to do with changing someone's quality of life, making their lives better. And that's hard to report on, again. It takes time, it takes money, and it may not be, in fact, feasible. And finally, and which I would guess is the biggest challenge within an organization, there's no bandwidth for evaluation. I find that to be true. I'm seeing nods in the room. People online, I suspect that you can relate. It ends up, no shaming or blaming, it ends up being an afterthought, right? It ends up, we want to get the work out there, we want to help our clients or serve the community, and so that takes so much time and energy that at the end of the day, we have to move on to the next project without the time to stop and reflect and measure how we did. Is this ringing a bell for anybody online? What are your challenges? Anything I haven't touched on? Online people, type away.
I would say, hello, and thank you for doing
Hello.
this. I came because we do advocacy.
Okay.
So there's no bed nights, there's no bags of food, there's no, I don't know how you do it in art, truly, but, so we do advocacy, and we just need to
This is a very,
quantify that.
today we're kind of doing middle of the road, because even the bags of food and the number of patients treated those outcomes are hard to measure. But I saw when I was researching some special articles and questions about advocacy, so I might not get as close to that in the talk as we would like, but I do have some resources for you if you'd like them. Anyone online, what are your challenges? Anyone have anything to say?
We do have someone who seems to be typing. So
Okay, I see someone's typing. We'll have the Jeopardy da-da-da-da.
What's your field?
Climate advocacy.
Oh,
Oh, so we have 2 advocacy folks in the room. Okay. Well, you said you did have some evaluation going on. What,
I mean, a lot of times, sometimes we are actually happy with the output, you know, so if we know we want to get 1,000 people to a rally, and we get 2,000 people to a rally, you know, those are outputs, but we know it's raising awareness of the issue, it's getting people energized for becoming more involved and letting their voice be heard, so, you know, and some of our funders even like to hear those stories.
well, yeah, and we'll get to that too.
But we can't, we can't like...
You're here for evaluation?
I believe it's, reporting impact
Yes,
question.
yes, that's it. How you doing?
Good.
Thanks for joining. We are talking about challenges to reporting impact or to evaluation, just to catch you up, that's where we are. Do we have an online comment?
Yeah, we have a couple. So one person says that they are starting to report on education endowments that they have been building. It's easy to measure the money, but they've been making up the donor report formats as they go along.
So the donors don't provide a format for the reporting, that the information that they want.
Yeah.
It's a challenge, okay?
Another person mentions that their organization doesn't have historical data to measure it yet.
The organization doesn't have historical data, and by that meaning a baseline where they started. Yeah, I know. Hopefully they'll answer.
They might give us a little bit more information
Okay.
now. They're typing a little bit more.
Okay. So data challenges, what does the donor want challenges, bandwidth challenges, how do we measure this and that?
He says it's baseline data.
Baseline data, okay. That's a good question. So moving on. Unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how much you enjoy measuring your success, the demand is growing. Why is that? Probably no surprise to anybody that as our ability to collect data improves, so does the funders' wish for it, and more complicated data. There's more calls for accountability. People want to know how the money's being spent and if your programs are effective and efficient and all that kind of thing, right? And then we ourselves, as our programs begin to mature and we develop more capacity in our own nonprofits, we start to have that bandwidth, right? We start to experience, hey, we can now, our programs are mature enough, we can truly measure them and see if we are achieving what we set out to do, see if we're making a difference, et cetera. Moving on. So, right now today, what is generally, because again, this is a middle-of-the-road discussion, what is generally being done for evaluation? And this is my terminology, and the terminology floats around quite a bit. So, I say outputs or activities to mean numbers. We served this many clients. We had this many people at a rally, as our friend here said. We, had this, we provided this many meals. We gave these many vaccines. It's counting. How many people or how much did we provide? Those are outputs, okay? Second one is client stories. A lot of us are using, especially as fundraisers, are using client stories to talk about how we impact individuals from their perspective, and them sharing their experience of working with our nonprofit. And then the last one is outcomes. And outcomes, which as I teach my class, are the change that you want to see in your community. Okay? Anything else I'm missing? Anything else that people use to report their impact?
I guess growth is part of output, huh?
Growth is part of output. By growth, you mean the growth of the organization?
Or the movement,
or the movement, okay. So, for an example, I'm going to think out loud and you correct me. So you hold a rally and 1,000 people show up, and that ends up attracting 200 more supporters or community members to your cause? Is that what you mean?
Or we're statewide, so how that's moving and growing statewide.
Moving and growing statewide.
More than outcomes, yeah.
Okay. okay? So for you guys, in a way, an outcome might, and help me out if I'm out of line, might be a little bit easier to define because you're looking for policy change, right? Is that, or what might be an outcome that you
I think that like a rally as an output can kind of reflect an outcome, increased public involvement or engagement.
increased public involvement or engagement, which is, how do you measure that? Number of mentions on TV news, number of people that turn out to the polls or vote for your, I can see where that would be a challenge. Believe me, I should say right here, I don't have all the answers. Sometimes what I can provide are the right questions to ask, but that's a good one to think about. Anyone online have different suggestions?
Yeah, one person mentioned that in addition to outputs and outcomes, that they've had to define and report on goals and objectives as well.
Define and report on goals and objectives. So that's the horse to your cart, if you will. Because defining and report your goals and objectives, and we'll get to this in a lot more detail, are what informs what you measure. Okay? Hopefully that's helpful. Let's move on so you can see that whether it is or not. First of all, why do we want to do evaluation? Just a little bit more about that. It's helpful to know why you're evaluating. Okay, some of us might say, well, because we have to write about it in our case for support, so the people, to demonstrate our impact, and because the funder said so. I mean, I'm being completely theatrical, of course. But if that's your objective for evaluation, it's going to put a kind of different spin on it than if you're trying to, welcome, than if you're trying to accomplish one of these objectives, which I've laid out for you. First of all, as responsible nonprofits, we want to be effective, right? We want to make sure that we are delivering services, that we are meeting the needs of the clients that our mission says that we need to. We also want to be transparent. We want to be able to report to our constituents about what we did with their money, for their community, et cetera, as part of being good nonprofit citizens. We want to be able to internally monitor and adjust our own services. So making sure that the program is working, if you will, working in quotation marks, quantify the benefits, make sure that we're getting the right type, correct in type of participants into the correct program, figure out what elements of a program are most and least effective, okay? And it also is going to help us determine consistency. Do we have across the board consistent delivery of our program? Why? Most of this comes down to allocation of resources, right? If something is not working in the way that we intended it to, then those resources could be reallocated to something that is working, right? So we need to have those checks in place. We need to always have our finger on the pulse of our programming and make sure that we are delivering on what we intend to do, right? Would you mind telling us who you are? We've got some advocacy folks in the room, so I've been kind of tailoring the conversation to that, but please introduce yourself.
My name's Stacey Argetta, and
Hi.
I was hired as the Director of Development at the Camden Hand, so my job's kind of changing to be Business Development Manager, so overseeing fundraising, communication.
Welcome. Hello.
Hi, my name is Yoshi. I'm a Director of Operations at a community bio lab. So we host a major state for biology.
Oh, okay.
And we are a nonprofit entity in the U district. And so I'm in charge of membership, development, kind of operations, and all that.
Okay, now we've got a little bit wider range of reporting impact needs in the room, so welcome. Thanks for joining us. And then we want to use our data, our feedback, the information that we gather to be able to respond to what's going on in our environment, both internally and externally. And a lot of this will revolve around the assumptions we make, and I'm like doing the big reveal soon when we put together our program plan or what I'm calling our theory of change. But just before we go to that, someone online had asked about being required, if you will, asked to provide program goals and objectives. And yes, that is something that we want to do in our case for support and in our program planning as well, right? You'll see in my couple of cool little diagrams that these often line up pretty closely. So what's important to know about our program objectives? I'm not a program person, so I am the fundraiser that provides the resources for them. So you program planners with experience, please jump in. What I've found when it comes to reporting on our impact, I always have to go back and look at the program or the organization's objectives and make sure that they match up with what we're evaluating. And you'd be amazed at how many folks or organizations where that's not happening. And I'll have an example of that in a minute. Your objective and your evaluation, your metrics, and what you're looking to measure have to match up, okay? How they're conceived and written matters. This does matter. You know, we in our case statements, and I've seen this with so many young professionals and students, we want to change the world, and that's fabulous. That's why we're in the business we're in, right? And so one of my well-meaning but young students will write in their program goal section, we are going to rid the world of poverty. And when they get down to their goals, of course, or their evaluation, I mean, so far nobody has ever been able to rid the world of poverty, sadly. So they will focus in on one or two steps that their organization is taking to change the effects of poverty on their clients. But when I come back to, I'll say, hey, you're not solving poverty here because it's not possible to do so. You've got to focus your goals and objectives in a way that match your evaluation metrics, what you measure properly. Does that help with our friend online who had brought that up as an issue? What do you all think about that? Is it something you struggle with when you're writing your case for support, or have you got it pretty much in the bag?
I remember writing a grant once that if we get kids food over the weekends, they'll do better on their test scores. That's our goal. And then the grantor saying, well, how'd you do? I was like, well, I don't know. We don't know how to measure that. I was like, well, don't put it in the grant then.
It's a common, not a mistake. I mean, it's often, enthusiasm or whatever, but you got to be really focused when you write your goals. And this is for both program planning and when you end up writing your case for support, right? That they match and that they can be measured. They can indeed be measured. My example here is, like I said, the goal of our food bank program is to end hunger in our community. Well, that's more your organization's vision. Your organization's vision would be to go out of business because there was no more hunger in your community. The sad truth is it's not likely to happen anytime soon. So let's make the goal realistic and measurable and say the goal of our food bank program is to serve 500 people experiencing food insecurity. Does that make sense to everybody? Again, people are in different stages along their evaluation path, so if this is old news to you, thank you for your patience. Do we have anything online?
The person who spoke about goals and objectives earlier says it makes sense.
That helps? Okay, awesome. Okay, moving on. So now let's talk a little bit about outputs versus outcomes. Going back to the last example and the definitions I gave at the beginning, outputs are numbers. They are the amount of services that you provide, the range of geography that you covered, the number of vaccines you gave out at your clinic. So in our last example, the output involved that if you're reporting your impact would be we fed 500 people if you were successful. Your goal was to feed 500 people. You did it. Fabulous. That is your output, and that sometimes is what, and we'll get to this again, is reported to you in your case or support, to your donors, to your constituents. Is it the outcome, though? No. The head shaking. Why not?
So I think it's the outcome is the ultimate change in your community you want to see. So one outcome for this could be decreased food insecurity in the community.
Absolutely.
Like, so you've actually changed the community, but it's not about measuring how many people, it's
Right.
about the actual
Right.
community change.
Right, yeah, and I use ridiculous examples to illustrate this to my students. So, okay, you fed 500 people, but you gave them all Fruit Loops. Is that the outcome that you wanted to see, that your folks are eating Fruit Loops? No, you want them to have changes in their health status. You want them to have proper nutrition. These are outcomes, right? These are changes. They're going from being food insecure and hungry, we assume, to having good nutritional meals and being more healthy. Outcome is health. So, to establish your outcomes and outputs, it helps to have what I call a theory of change. Who has a theory of change in their nonprofit? Written, otherwise. Okay, so yeah. Anyone online have anything to say? Theory of change is also known as a logic model. Again, the terminology is all over the map sometimes here. Logical framework, program theory, or program matrix. It's a program plan. Okay? So it identifies the operations of your programming, which informs how you're going to report your impact. It tells you what data you need to collect to monitor and measure your impact. Okay? And this is really convenient if you're brand new and just getting going, right? You're in the prime place to create one before you ever open your door. However, most of us are not in that spot, right? So it is a great opportunity for your organization to sit back and reflect and literally, what is it, your cart, hay, your horse? I don't know which is which. To go through the process and clarify your assumptions and your steps and test everything that you've been assuming works in written, if you will, formal form. Is what we're doing working, and if so, if not, or what have we missed, where could we change, et cetera. So a few steps on this. I figured the best way to talk about this would be by showing an example, and this is taken right from the book I recommended, the Goldilocks book, and it's a sample theory of change for a fictitious feeding program for children, okay? And can you guys see this okay? Should I increase it? Okay. And everywhere it says CHW, it's a community health worker. So with respect to your case for support, I put some arrows down the side. So some of this is in place already. If you've been through these workshops, or if you have a case for support or program narrative of any kind, the first step you take is defining the need in your community. And we talked about that in our second workshop. What is the problem that you're trying to solve? What is the problem? Here is moderate malnutrition in children caused by a lack of calories and insufficient nutrients. That's the problem that this fictitious organization is trying to solve. Hopefully you guys have your own. If you didn't, there's some recordings on our website from our needs statement workshop that might be helpful to you. What are we going to do about it? These are our activities, okay? This is in your case statement. This is your project description or narrative, okay? It's the who, what, how, when, where of your work. So in our example, they are training community health workers to identify malnourished children. They're conducting household assessment visits. They're enrolling malnourished children in the NFA program. It's the feeding program. Providing monthly nutrition supplements, trainings to families, and monthly follow-up visits to track nutrition status. Okay, so those are the steps we're going to take again, the who's, the where, what they're going to do, etc. These are the outputs that you might report on or that you might want to measure for this program. Okay. How many community health workers were trained? how many trainings were offered, how many were trained, how many household visits they conducted, how many children were identified, how many families recruited, enrolled, how many trainings, how many attended, how many received supplements, did they know how to use supplements, this is a yes or no, follow-up visits, and are they using the food supplements in their home, are the families using it? These are all outputs, right? Because what do they tell us? It's how much, how many, what was the participation? Tells if they used the supplements, if they were trained to administer them and visit the families, right? If the families were trained how to use them. But is that the change that we want to see? I think you already know the answer to this one, right? No. The outcomes that we want are here. Families actually adopt the improved nutrition practices. The rates of childhood malnutrition drop. Fewer children are referred to the regional hospital with severe malnutrition. So is everybody getting a sense of the difference between these two? Yeah.
I have a question. So those
Sure.
outcomes, should that be directly, should you limit the scope of the outcomes to whatever is defined in the need statement? Meaning
No.
that, like,
Well,
your outcomes are based on, solving your needs.
the outcomes are based on, the activities are your solution to the need, right? And from those activities come the outcomes that you wish to accomplish, right? These folks saw that there was childhood malnutrition in the community, and they decided to take the approach of going into the household with nutritional supplements and community health workers. They could have just as easily said, we're going to buy a van, and we're going to go to Costco, and we're going to purchase meals for these children and drive around to their houses and feed them vegetables and, healthy food. And that could achieve some of the same outcomes, right? Malnutrition going down, hospital visits going down. Their activities, they decided to do it this way. So does that make sense to you? Either one would have been the same outcome. But they chose this route because that was their expertise, or the way they thought they could solve the problem best. That one I really don't know how to answer. Everyone with me so far? Is that helpful? Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone online have an issue with me yet?
We don't have any questions or comments so far on
Okay.
this topic.
Okay.
I'll let you know if anything
Okay.
comes up.
Great, thanks. All right, so this is a sample logic model. This is a sample theory of change. This is how we're going to make change for the people suffering from this issue, malnourished children. With the logic model goal assumptions, and this is the only slide where I really get a tiny bit away from the case for support to help to show this to the people that are actually designing and performing evaluation, because it will be helpful to you, and it never hurts to know what's going on, right? Grant writers, case for support, development people writers. Under each of our activities, we are going to make assumptions, and this tells us what could go wrong, basically. So here are, for this fictitious example, the assumptions made for the activity of the community health workers conducting household visits to identify and enroll malnourished children in supplemental feeding programs. Okay, so what does that activity assume? That the community health workers are going to go to all the houses that they're assigned to. That the families of the children are at home and willing to speak with the staff about their children and speak the same language and allow them to assess their nutritional status. That the families agree with the assessments and see the value in the program. That there are no concerns about the social stigma of not being able to properly feed your child, or that they're outweighed by the desire to help those children. that the families have time to attend the training, and that families enroll their children in this program. So when you're working through, for program planning, this is the program planning aside again, and evaluation, you're going to want to think of everything that could go wrong. Or think of your assumptions and say, okay, what if this happens? How do we adjust? How do we cover for that eventuality? And this is going to go a long way towards preventing or putting in place steps that you can take before it's time to evaluate the program, and then you're at the end saying, oh geez, we set all this fabulous work up, but nobody spoke Somali, so we couldn't do our program. We were stopped by that. Again, I'm being theatrical. But going through your assumptions as part of your planning process, as part of your theory of change, is going to help you with that. And perhaps open a venue for more funding. I mean, now you know you need Somali speakers. Hey, put some more money in the grant for translation, right? Okay, so carrying on. How am I doing for time? Oh, okay, good. Doing all right. How's everybody doing out there? Anybody need to stretch or anything? Up at the computer, ooh, reach for the ceiling, touch the ground. Okay, so with that in mind, what are some of the options we have for describing impact? Some of them are already in place. We talked about them already, right? But an important question before you start is to ask yourself and your donors, if you feel the need, if that seems appropriate, how or for whom are we describing this? Is it for our general public? Is it for a particular foundation? Is it for our annual appeal? Is it for our website, et cetera, because each one of them is going to have a different need for information and a different philosophical bent, if you will. Some foundations might be more about the data and the numbers. Some want to hear stories, and they want to hear, they want to see photos of the kids or whatever it is that you're doing. So know who your audience is when you're reporting impact. This is about a case for support, so to cover all your bases for that, I would suggest, and we'll get to this, combining data with stories, okay? There's a great quote from Funder in just a few slides that tells you what kind of impact that has on him. So, starting from the top, one of the first ways we can report impact when we don't have any data, there's a baseline question online, and again, I've faced this with my new nonprofit folks who are starting nonprofits. We haven't had any impact yet because we aren't operating yet. Okay, so what I suggest to them is replication of best practices. Okay, so this is not necessarily reporting your own impact per se, because you don't have any yet. We'll talk about it in just a minute. Sorry, I'm skipping ahead on the slides again. Client stories we have discussed, okay? Then we come down to the difference between monitoring our activities for accountability and for improved decision making, which is a lot about outputs, and tracking and reporting on outcomes, okay? So those are the four options that I've found in my reading and experience. Anybody think I'm missing anything? And we're going to talk about each one going forward. Okay. Never too late if you have questions. Again, first is replication of best practices. And this is when you don't have really any data yet yourself. Okay? So I used this one in the class. I actually did the research for it. I'm very concerned about children's hunger, as you can probably tell. So I pretended I wanted to start a new summer feeding program somewhere in the Washington State area. And I tried to find some communities that don't have them. And there is no summer feeding program in Skycomish, Washington. The closest one is in Issaquah, about 35 miles away. So that's a real barrier to kids in the summertime whose parents work, who can't get to Issaquah, whatever the story is. So what I did is that I would write about the need for summer feeding programs. I think we all know the deal there. And the fact that the closest one is 35 miles away. And then I looked for similar communities. I said, okay, Skycomish has these demographics. Burien ends up having similar demographics, right? Percentage of the age, the population that's foreign-born, income levels, et cetera. And I said, okay, in Burien, they've achieved a 95% success rate at feeding kids in the summertime with a summer feeding program that happens through the city parks and da-da-da-da. With a similar population in Skycomish, we feel confident that we can have the same impact here. And here's how we're going to do it. And then, of course, you outline what you're going to do to feed those kids. You carry on with your narrative, et cetera. Okay? So far, so good? There's a question there, or you're giving me a thumbs up? Okay. Second is client stories. Oh, or monitoring data. Did I skip one? Okay. I'll go ahead to monitoring then. Monitoring data is what we think of as output, okay? And this is important because this is the information that you get on your own, telling you what you're doing, and sometimes that's what the donors want to hear. I think you were saying, you report on outputs, and sometimes they do want to know that there were 1,000 people at a rally, right? So, know your audience. If you know that your donors and funders are looking to feel assured that you are doing what you said you would do with their money, that's what you're going to report to them. We asked you for $1,000 to, again, feed 500 children. Okay, that's a bad example, but you know what I mean. You gave us $1,000, and we fed us that 500 children. Okay? There are 5 different kinds of data that you can use when you're monitoring your program. And remember that monitoring is about accountability. Again, did you do what you said you would do? Are you delivering on your promises? And then for future implementation for internally, this is for the staff to look at and say, hey, this is off. Have we thought about changing it up? We're doing great here. We can leave that alone and focus on this area that we need to improve. Or that we're doing great here, and this population over here doesn't seem to be benefiting from our services. Maybe we should put them into this program and funnel more resources over there. This is internal. Monitoring is internal and for external accountability, okay? So we're going to want financial data. What did we spend? What did we bring in? Plain and simple. We're going to want activity tracking. And that lines up with the key activities in your theory of change or your project narrative, whatever you want to call it, right? So who, when, how, what you did to try to change to affect the problem, not change the problem. Okay? These are your counts. These are your this many clients and this many community health workers, et cetera. Targeting data, which I hate that word, but I stole it out of the book, so I had to go all the way. Targeting data talks about, are we serving the population that we intended to? Okay? And are the people who are using our services using the best one for them? Okay? When I was at Cancer Lifeline, we had an actual lifeline. It was an actual telephone service that was 24 hours a day. And we found that people in the Latino community were not using the line because there wasn't anybody on who spoke Spanish. Rates of cancer aren't any lower in Latino communities. They just couldn't access our services because it wasn't right for them. So we got some translators. That's the kind of data, that's what I'm talking about. Okay? Engagement data. It's a yes/no. Did an individual that we targeted, which I hate that word, sorry about it, participate or not? Kind of a yes/no question. And to what depth did they participate? Do we feel that they, did they show up at the food bank but grab a bag and run away, or did they go through the line and fill their cart and go to the dairy and the fresh produce and stop at the community coordinating desk on the way out to ask about getting a free bus pass. Does that make sense? The intensity of their participation. How much are they using our services? There's yes or no, they did or they didn't, and then the extent to which they did. Okay? And the last one is feedback, and I know a lot of y'all do already collect this, so awesome. If you don't, the strengths and weaknesses of your programming from participants' perspectives can be invaluable in figuring out what it is they need. Yeah.
So we have someone online who just had a comment.
Great.
She says that she's found these numbers are helpful in writing appeals to show the measurable impact of the gift. So,
Right.
for example, like $5 today will buy, special archive materials, or $20 will pay for 2 kids to attend this event for free.
Right. So the impact of giving is another thing to think about, right? When we were talking a little bit about measuring the results, but we can say your $5 is going to buy, what was the example?
Special archive materials.
Buy special archive materials that will ensure that these items remain whole and integrate, have integrity in perpetuity. That's the impact you're going to have with your $5. So, yes, excellent point. Thank you. This is monitoring data, okay? Notice, there is nothing about outcomes here. But this is still valuable and important to do because it's going to help you continuously improve. And, again, in your case of support, in your appeals, in your fundraising materials, a lot of people want to see these numbers, and they're important to them, and that's fine. That's very satisfactory to them, okay? Client stories, I got out of order. Sorry about that. We do use client stories also, and that's when you want to really create an emotional response. You want to create a connection with the humanity of the people that you're serving, or the cause that you're serving, and its impact on real human beings, okay? This is also obviously used for appeals, for special events, for videos, all kinds of storytelling going on in the fundraising sector right now. But for reporting impact, it also works. This is another one that can be really helpful when you are new or don't have data yet. You're formalizing. I'm working with a nonprofit now who's starting to professionalize fundraising, and they haven't collected a thing. They don't know how much clothing they've given away or furniture. They don't know, but they do know people that they talk to when they come in, and they talk to single mothers who say, okay, I'm so glad you guys are around because it's a choice. If you weren't, it would be a choice between food and clothes for my kids. That kind of thing says a lot about the impact of their services on the people that they work with, okay? So often it's impactful to combine the monitoring data you have about numbers of people served with the story, okay? And this is that wonderful quote. This gentleman is out of Minnesota. He's with a big foundation here. And he said, and this is for your case of support, he said, if you are on Meals program, I already know that you serve 1,000 meals every day. But tell me about the lives of 1 or 2 of those people who are just being served those meals. What difference do you make for them? It's not just about the meal, it's about human contact, which is something else that Meals on Wheels offers. And that's what this funder wanted to hear about. So again, know your audience, right? And combine the two. I don't think you can report really too much on evaluation, but I'm kind of a geek that way, so there you have it. The thing you have to be careful about is not generalizing a client story. One person's experience cannot be generalized to say, one person went through this, that means everybody has. You can't do that. That's where we get into talking about really rigorous outcome measurement, which is the next slide. So outcomes, as we've discussed, pretty much this whole hour, are about the change that you want to see in your community. These are commonly done by outside professionals. You'll hire a consultant, you're academic. You may have someone on staff that's skilled in evaluation. I don't know, the larger nonprofits often do. City U does have someone that evaluates our program on staff, but are many of us working for institutions that are that big? I don't know what the range is in this room, but they usually are outside objective folks who come in and work with you to develop the questions that you're looking to answer. And where do those questions come from? Your theory of change. It's okay, I see you're all frantically writing. The design of your evaluation process, report the results to you, and make recommendations for program changes, or talk with you about how you can adjust your services to meet the results of the evaluation. It's important to know that evaluation of outcomes is for more mature programs, okay? The readings I did suggested that you should monitor your own program and use the feedback for self-improvement for several years before you go, so you make sure everything's finely tuned and ticking before you go out and hire an evaluator to look at them. Is that making sense? You guys are nodding, so I'm hoping it does. It made sense to me. Maybe because I work so much with people in new startup nonprofits that are so frustrated. They're like, we don't have any outcomes yet, and I know you don't, so let's try this for a stopgap, right? Big challenge, and this is a little bit coming from my academic background, is to associate causation with your intervention, with your services, okay? So, was the change caused by our program, or could there have been something else completely independent that happened that we didn't account for that is, in fact, affecting that change? And going back to our fictitious nutrition nonprofit, let's say, for example, that everything worked well, but you didn't know that the child's school was all of a sudden going to get a $1 million grant to increase their nutritional offerings, and the fact that the kids eating better at school rather than that your program is making the difference in their nutritional scores, in their improved health outcomes. That's an outside influence that you didn't account for, but something you have to watch for when you are evaluating your outcomes. And if you do a good job in your theory of change with those assumptions, one of your assumptions is going to be the school isn't providing the child with sufficient nutrition, so we have to intervene. And then because you're watching the environment and know when that happens, okay, now school is providing nutrition. What does that say about our program? Should we move our resources somewhere else? Do we continue it on the weekends or during the summer when the kids are not in school? See how it kind of all ties back together? Everybody with me? Okay, how are the online folks doing? Awfully quiet out there. So work through an example, and then we'll be to the end of our time. So Youth Care is one of my favorite nonprofits, and I went out to see how they evaluate their impact. They do a full impact report, which is similar to what we would call an annual report, right? Their mission is that they work to end youth homelessness and to ensure that young people are valued for who they are and empowered to achieve their potential. I underlined those because in my reading, they line up with their tagline. They want homeless kids off the street and preparing for life. Okay? What does that not say? Which is I know, I'm throwing that question out. What do you think the folks at Youth Care hope will happen if they get kids off the streets and empowered for life? They're going to go on and be, productive members of society. They're not going to go to jail or become addicts or whatever horrible things happen to kids who are on the streets, right? But they don't make the claim that that is the problem that they're trying to solve. And they don't use that to evaluate their program. They don't say, in 20 years, Joe now is a lawyer and has a wife and family and lives in Bellevue. No. They know that that's beyond the scope of their work. So here's how they report their impact, and I've repeated this little thing down here so we can kind of match it up, right? So, homeless youth off the street. They have 1,000 kids coming into their drop-in services. They have housed in their shelter, 648. They've prevented through their safe places to where teens in distress can reach out to prevent them from becoming homeless. Almost 8,000 kids and adults, young adults. So, off the streets, that's part of it. They put kids in housing. Then they start preparing them for life by offering education, employment, and this reports on who in the community is supporting them, right? Now, this is a case for support class, so I wasn't going to have you all read a big narrative like a case for support would be written, right? But are you kind of seeing how what they're reporting on matches up to what they say they're going to do and doesn't have a lot of what I call hopeful claims that we all have in our hearts because we want to see these kids become productive, non-addict, non-mentally ill adults. We have those in here, but we can't make those claims in our case for support or in our reporting of our impact. We've got to stick to what we said we were going to do. And that still can be pretty bloody impressive, right? I think if you extrapolate a little bit, youth care might hope that an outcome was a productive adulthood and happy adulthood, but there's no way to measure it, so they don't report on it. Everybody with me so far? Maybe one day they'll get funded and do a longevity study and follow their clients and say, okay, where did we go with the kids that we helped out in the 1980s? It would be great, right? Right now, I guess it's, beyond anyone's scope. So does this help? Does it make sense?
Do they use client stories to help?
They certainly do. They're all over their website, in video, I don't know if you've ever been to their luncheon. They have clients come and speak at their luncheon, but they're all over their website. I mean, you can't go to a page without seeing one of their clients' photographs and even a small quote or a complete video on how youth care has changed their life, which is really smart of them. It makes me want to write a test. I don't know about you all. Okay.
I think sometimes funders have the bigger, final picture, and we want to speak to their final picture, like, productive citizens, so we
I think
right
you're
all around
absolutely
that.
right. And
Yeah.
what my solution would be now that I've learned more about this is in the best world, you have a relationship with that funder, right? So if I see on a grant application that they want me to tell them about the outcome, I'm going to call them up and say, okay, here's what we measure. Here's our hope for outcome, but we right now do not have the resources to survey every single audience member that went to the theater to see the ballet. I used to write for the ballet, right? And that's the only way we can get at how it changed their lives. What would you like to see? What will satisfy your requirements for evaluation? And have a conversation with them about it. Because I agree with you. Sometimes funders don't understand that big lofty goals that we all share kind of translate a little bit into not as practical for measuring and reporting. And mind you, I'm not saying we shouldn't try. What I'm saying is it takes time, it takes money, and it takes a really clear definition of what the outcomes are that you want to measure, right? You guys, the nonprofits are the experts in the field, right? Is there a question also that way? We might go over a little bit, folks. Sorry if you have to leave, but I got a few more gems for you, so if you can't stick around, maybe 5 more minutes.
We don't have any specific questions on these topics.
Okay, I thought I saw a hand. Okay, so how do we get started if we're not doing it already? Well, my recommendation would be that we start developing theory of change or formalizing it. I think you guys, any nonprofit that's operating has a good deal of their theory of change in place. Certainly you have the activity. You're doing the work, right? You know about the need, especially if you took this class in the last time, in March, but you know the problem you're trying to solve, right? So work through that theory of change and articulate the outputs and the outcomes that you can measure, and start with maybe 3. Just 3 that you're not already measuring. And talk about it with your board and staff, especially your program people. You know, unless you are the program person, which I think a lot of you are. Establish 1 or more measures to gauge progress in achieving that. Communicate those. And remember, we can be measuring monitoring data, or if we're ready for outcomes, that. And keep a dashboard that kind of keeps you updated on your progress, okay? Tracks a broad range of them. So at any given time, you can respond to a funder. You can update your case for support by saying, you know, last year it was 2,000, now we're up to 4,000 vaccines given, kids adopted, dogs saved, right? Is this helpful? And now I'm going to ask, everybody has a phone or some kind of computer, folks. I know you're sitting in front of one, right? So here's the step I want you to take today. Think of just one step that you can do to begin to improve or continue your evaluation process that will help you with your case for support or your program work. Again, we're going back and forth a little here. And send an email to yourself through futureme.com. Date it for what you think is appropriate, like by the end of, if you want to do something by the end of May or the middle of June, date your email for that day. Reminding yourself, you know, hey, I set this goal for myself at that workshop at City U on May 14th. How am I doing on this particular step? Send yourself an email to remind yourself. One step you're going to take. Just one. Anybody think that's manageable? Anybody want to share their steps? Be bold, people. What's one thing you all could do? Online folks, you too. No escaping. You can't hide from me.
I'm going to bring some board retreat notes back to a fund development committee at the end of this month.
Board retreat notes to a fund development committee. Awesome.
We do it, and then we never revisit our theory of change.
Okay, great. Revisiting theory of change by bringing board retreat notes to a development committee meeting. Yes?
Yeah, we have a couple online ones. One person writes that their next step is going to be writing out a theory of change, and especially thinking about assumptions.
Writing out theory of change and thinking about assumptions. Great, fantastic.
Another person mentions that they're going to make a flow chart with output and outcome.
Great. Same thing. Whatever it takes, you know, to get you thinking about what you want to measure based on your activities and the needs you're trying to solve. Flow chart, theory of change, whatever you want to call it, or however you want to organize it. That's great. I think it'll be very helpful for y'all. And do use, again, some of the free resources, or purchase the book. I'm not pushing the book. I just found it so helpful, right? So I'll skip the question slide to show you that there are a bunch of resources. This is the book I was blathering away about, and all of these are excellent, excellent, excellent. This playbooks one is really good. It takes you through each step of evaluation I thought quite thoroughly, and I will send these to you, so you don't need to worry about photographs or scrawling notes or whatever. I left the full on link there, so because I'll send you a PDF and a link, obviously, in PDF you can't click through, so you can copy and paste and just go forward and in Chrome or your browser or whatever to check these out. Questions? This is another good, the 7 Deadly Sins of Impact Evaluation was very good. It tells you what not to do. I really thought, I was like, oh geez, man, I wish I had 2 hours because I would go over these, but I don't. So read it if you have the time, right? Were there questions online? Questions from anybody in the room?
Like,
No, everybody's frantically sending themselves emails. Yay! Well, thank you for being here. My card is up here by Austin. If you want to reach out to me in any way, I'm always happy to listen or read your evaluation sections of your case for support if you would find that helpful. Advise you on it in some way. That's why I get paid the big bucks. I get paid to teach you to raise money, so make me work for it. Thanks online, folks. Hope we'll see you in June. Soon that date and workshop information will be coming out. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Have a fabulous day. Great. Thanks for coming.